Please subscribe and click the hype and like button to get more content like this. Before we start, a quick disclaimer. Everything demonstrated in this video is strictly for educational purposes, to show you how to protect yourself. All demonstrations are performed in a controlled lab environment on our own testing devices. We never target real users, and using this knowledge to gain unauthorized access to actual people or systems is strictly illegal and unethical.
In this video, we're going to perform open source reconnaissance using the Amass reconnaissance tool. To do this, we're going to be running on a Windows system and running the Amass tool inside of a Docker container. However, there are other ways that Amass supports running, including building from source or using a pre-built binary. So depending on your preference, you can work with Amass in different ways. To get started, open up a PowerShell terminal on a system with Docker installed and run the command docker build-t amass, followed by the link to the Amass GitHub repository, which is github.com/owasp-amass/amass.git, and then hit enter. This will build our Docker container for us. Once we have the Docker container built, we can start to run the Docker image. So an example command that we could run is docker run amass and then enum -- list. And this will run our Docker container and output a list of all the data sources that Amass is using. So here in the output, we can see a list of all the data sources, the type of those data sources, and whether or not those data sources are available. So as an example of some common ones that we might be familiar with, we can see that we have Shodan, which is an API type data source, but it's not available for us. We also have the wayback data source, which is an archive type, and that is available in our installation. So this is a good way of seeing all the data sources available to you, and which data sources are available in Amass but maybe not installed in your instance. So now that we know how to install and start running Amass, let's look at more specifically how we can start to use the tool. The tool has various commands available to us, and the first one we're going to look at is the intel command. To use the intel command, we'll start with docker run amass, intel, followed by -h. And the -h tells us we want to see the help output for this command. So the output under this command gives us the usage for the intel command, along with all of the different flags we could pass to that command. The intel command is designed to collect open source intelligence on a target. So as an example, we could use it to collect intel on a specific word like OWASP. So let's run this intel command on owasp.org, and we're going to use the -d flag to pass owasp.org as a value, which will be our domain name, and then we're going to do a whois lookup on it. And we can see we can do that if we scroll down and use the -whois flag, which will give us all provided domains running through a reverse whois. So to do this, we can use the command docker run amass intel -d owasp.org -whois. And now Amass is performing its open source reconnaissance on owasp.org using a reverse whois. And it's doing this using the data sources we saw previously in the enum -- list. And as the command starts to run, we can see it populating various domains with blockster.com and modeltime.com. Now let's return to the enum command we used previously. Once again, let's start by using the -h command to get a help output for that command. So I'm going to run docker run amass enum -h. And similar to the help command we saw under the intel command, we see an output of all of the different flags and usage options for the enum command. So let's use the enum command to passively search for any subdomains that are present with owasp.org. To do this, I'm going to use the -passive flag, which we see here. And this isn't really necessary because passive is the default setting, but it doesn't hurt in this case to be explicit. And then I'm going to use the same -d flag to pass a domain value, in this case owasp.org. So to do this, I use the command docker run amass enum -passive-d OWASP.org. And this will use the data sources to search for subdomains on OWASP.org. And what we see is a long output of the subdomains that have been found using this Amass enum. So this is how we can use Amass as a tool to perform open source reconnaissance and intel during a penetration test. The Amass GitHub page also hosts more resources. For example, if you want to install Amass in a different way than we've shown here, this is where you can go to do that. So you can open up a web browser and navigate to the URL seen at the top of my screen, which is github.com/OWASP-Amass/Amass. And on this page, you can scroll down to the installation section and see different ways that you can install the Amass tool. We can also go to this installation guide linked underneath the installation header and see more detailed information about how we can go about doing all of these installations. On this page, we could also go to the left-hand bar and click on things like scripting to get information about using the scripting engine. They have an extensive tutorial on using the tool, as well as a general user guide. So these are useful resources for learning about the Amass tool.